Chapter 1766 World Reflection. Zhang Yi, haven't you contacted the other regions? For example, asking them to send troops with you or something like that. Zhu Zheng's words were tantamount to asking in vain, as he was well aware of the situation at hand, and that the other regions were simply distracted. Zhang Yi also understood what his intentions were. However, Zhang Yi still asked knowingly, how could the other regions have the energy to care about the affairs of other countries? Commander Zhu, is it possible that you have something in mind? Zhu Jing coughed lightly and finally stated his purpose. After all, the other regions are somewhat detached from us, but the Jiangnan region is your old home. Whatever you want to do, I will definitely give my full support. So this time, I want to let my goddaughter go over with you. What do you think? Zhang Yi sneered in his heart. This face of Zhu Jing was really big. He had secretly gotten a Zhu Yu without his knowledge, and he had even let Zhu Yu run out to collect heads during the previous big battle. This kind of practice had caused dissatisfaction in the various regions and naturally wouldn't make Zhang Yi happy. As a result, at this point in time, he was still able to shyly come to Zhang Yi and let Zhang Yi bring Zhu Yu to Fremons. It had to be said that a person who became a great man did need a thick enough skin. Zhang Yi smiled and shook his head. Commander Zhu, this is not good. Of course, in principle, I don't mind bringing Zhu Yu along to Fremons. But with the world being so chaotic nowadays, after I leave the Jiangnan region, someone has to be in charge of keeping this place safe. That's why it's better to let Zhu Yu stay behind and defend Blizzard City, especially to protect Commander Zhu. Zhang Yi had a sincere look on his face. When Zhu Jing heard Zhang Yi's words that he didn't want to bring Zhu Yu, he quickly said with a smile, "Don't worry, although Zhu Yu isn't here, we've already built a complete defense system. Not to mention that Deng Shintong is still here. And right now, the Wulwan Empire has been repelled, and Brahma has been shocked by you with your great strength. Who would dare to come looking for death?" Zhu Jing made some boastful remarks. Zhang Yi laughed. "Commander Zhu, Gao Changkong is not dead yet." Hearing this name, the muscles on Zhu Jing's face visibly twitched. Zhang Yi supported his chin with both hands and leisurely looked into Zhu Jing's eyes and said, "The last time I met him in the southwest region, the people he had brought to Brahma in the first place by his side were pretty much dead. At that time I advised him, hoping that he would forget about his hatred and come back. After all, an epsilon-level mutant still has a lot of value. But at that time, he refused. He didn't say anything to me but just shook his head." Zhang Yi paused. But a strong sense of fear rose within Zhu Jing's heart. Without words, it meant that there was no need to talk anymore. It also meant that Gao Changkong would definitely not let Zhu Jing, and the group of Blizzard City's dignitaries behind him, go. Nowadays, for Gao Changkong, killing Zhu Jing had become an obsession in his heart. People always needed some sort of goal to be able to find out where the value of their lives lay. Zhu Jing gave a dry laugh. Gao Changkong, he still dares to come back. He knew that Zhang Yi was deliberately using Gao Changkong as an excuse for not wanting to take Zhu Yu to Fremons. Zhang Yi smiled faintly. When I'm around, he wouldn't dare. But if I'm not around, there's no telling. The older a person gets, the more they are afraid of death, especially if they are well-bred and in a high position. Zhu Jing didn't dare to gamble. Moreover, Zhang Yi's attitude was already very clear, not wanting to bring Zhu Yu over at all. After thinking for a while, Zhu Jing shook his head helplessly. "Zhang Yi, I know that you have a grudge against me for Zhu Yu. But I also just want to make the Jiangnan region better." Zhang Yi inwardly didn't know how many times he rolled his eyes. It was such a time, but he still ran over to make official remarks. "Old Zhu, can you believe yourself when you say such words?" Zhang Yi nodded and said with a sincere face, "I know, Commander Zhu. We all aim to build Huashu Kingdom, make the Jiangnan region more prosperous and strong, and fill this world with love and peace. You and I," he pointed to his chest and then to Zhu Jing, his gaze resolute, "we are on the same path through thick and thin." Zhu Jing's expression froze on his face. Then, Your troop strength is too small, why don't you bring 2 investigation teams over? Bai Li Changqing and the others had officially joined Zhang Yi's team at this point. Zhang Yi and Zhu Jing had briefly exchanged greetings in the first place, and Zhu Jing didn't dare to disagree with the request he made. Zhang Yi said, "No need, I have people available under me." Then, "I'll just have to wish you all the best for this operation, the heavenly officials will give you blessings, and your martial arts luck will prosper," Zhu Jing said with a smile. Zhang Yi nodded and then ended the communication. Zhu Jing leaned back on the sofa seat with a gloomy and terrifying expression on his face. While on the sofa to his left, Zhu Yu was sitting quietly, with no expression on his face, his long ebony hair almost hanging down to the ground, like a large mass of black seaweed. "Zhang Yi, this guy." Zhu Jing mumbled Zhang Yi's name. For Zhang Yi, he really loved and hated him. However, what he loved the most was the power in his own hands. So even if he knew that it would create a rift between Zhang Yi and him, he must cultivate Zhu Yu. Zhu Yu sensed Zhu Jing's troubles. She spoke softly, her voice cold as if it had traveled through a vast ice field before reaching one's ears. "Father, I don't need Zhang Yi, I can travel to Fremons myself." Lan Xinqing, who was behind Zhu Jing in a board uniform, also lowered his head and said, "Fremons has also sent us a request for assistance, we can bypass Zhang Yi and head to Fremons on our own." Zhu Jing glanced at Zhu Yu as he rubbed his temples hard, only to feel his head hurt even more. "No, although your current strength has skyrocketed, you have only just crossed the threshold of the Black Chariot. And your combat experience is too lacking, it's too risky to let you travel to Fremons alone." Zhu Yu's strength was strong. But an individual's strength might not be able to determine everything on a complex battlefield. The mutation in Fremons was a war between 2 civilizations, and anything could happen on the battlefield. Is a high supernatural ability index invincible? That was purely a joke. Without sufficient logistical supplies and a strong intelligence system, a raw egg like Zhu Yu would become a fly on the wall when she arrived in Fremons. To put it bluntly, she might even have trouble finding food. What's wrong with Black Chariot? It would starve to death just the same without something to eat. Without rich combat experience, falling into the encircling net of the mechanical core could also result in being obliterated by the super-age weapons. In the previous battle against the Wuluan Empire, she had completely relied on Zhu Zheng's scheming, and had just come out to pick up the pieces when the 2 armies had fought to the limit. It didn't mean that she already possessed the ability to fight on her own. Lan Xinqing persuaded, however, this is likewise an excellent opportunity for Miss to enhance her strength. In case you miss it, it would really be a pity. Zhu Jing pondered for a long time before finally making a decision. Don't be in a hurry, what kind of situation Fremons is in nowadays is anyone's guess. Let Zhang Yi and the others go over first. When the time is right, we will go over again. Lan Xinqing hung his head and said, "Yes, Commander Zhu." Zhu Yu sat quietly on the sofa with no waves in his eyes, like an exquisite doll. Fremons asked for help from the whole world, hoping that they could send troops and solve that mechanical civilization that suddenly appeared. The Pantheon was certainly powerful, but their population was too sparse, and their troop strength was nowhere near that of Huashu Kingdom and Fremons. The Source's forces, which had to remain in the capital city of Karen as well as several major cities of importance, could not be easily mobilized, much less able to address the irregularities that appeared from time to time across the country. All the major kingdoms and international powers were weighing the pros and cons of this, and many powerful kingdoms and organizations were eager to move. On Zhang Yi's side, they had decided to act 3 days later. That night, Zhang Yi entered dreamland. The familiar murmuring in his ears sounded once again. He had thought that this was the demon in his heart brought about by the Wuluan Empire, yet when the invasion of the Wuluan Empire was repelled, the murmuring did not disappear. It was only now that he had slowly begun to adapt to the existence of this murmuring as a sound that helped him sleep at night. In his dream, he saw an ocean condensed from dots of white balls of light. And every time he touched a ball of light, a subtle feeling would arise. After waking up, the scenes in the dream were forgotten, but they would give him a special feeling. There were times when it was like entering heaven, soothing his spirit. There were times when it was like descending into hell, leaving him in a cold sweat. Zhang Yi was not sure what this was, and apart from him, he had asked everyone around him who had never felt this way. Gradually, he stopped caring. Until the third day, the day he was scheduled to leave for Fremons arrived. In the entire world, something beyond everyone's imagination, unthinkable to the extreme happened. The northern part of Fremons was located in the area of the Arctic Circle, close to the Arctic Ice Ocean. On the morning of this very day, several workers who were wrapped in tightly wrapped cold suits came to the beach, ready to break the ice and catch some mutated ice fish as usual, when they saw the sea level in the distance boiling up like boiling water. The fishing workers immediately scurried off into the distance, while not forgetting to take out their equipment to record the sight before them. After the end of the world, people seemed to be numb to this weird world, and were no longer surprised to see even the strangest things. However, the next scene they saw when they ascended the snowy hill still made their jaws drop. As if the sea had been separated by something, a huge pit sunk into it, and then a huge object slowly rose up. It was impossible to describe it with accurate words. Its color was strange, its surface was like a mirror, but the whole body was polyhedron like a pike. The huge prismatic polyhedron emerged from a deep pit sunken in the sea water. Its size was so huge that it was like an island surfacing from the ocean, and the fishing workers were able to see it clearly from a distance of more than 10 kilometers. An experienced worker reached out his thumb to make a comparison and came to a startling conclusion. This huge bizarre polygonal crystal had actually reached a height of thousands of meters. That prismatic crystal appeared to be slow, but it was actually rapidly ascending into the air, surprisingly flying high into the sky, and then flying towards the south. Immediately afterward, what made those fishing workers even more horrified happened. One after another prismatic crystals, as if endless, gushed out from the deep sea, flew up into the sky, and scattered to the entire world. That day, the world turned upside down. Zhang Yi was woken up in his sleep by someone shouting at him. His sleep quality was average, and the cautious habits he had developed after the end of the world made him wake up at the slightest movement. "Brother, get up. Look outside." Lu Karen was the first to run to Zhang Yi's door, knocking on the doors and shouting. Zhang Yi snapped his eyes open, and after confirming the person outside, he subconsciously turned his head to look out the window. Outside the huge glass, there was a world of snowflakes. In the distant sky, several huge warships were hanging upside down below the surface of the sea. The sky was azure blue, and a huge ice floe was floating above it. Zhang Yi thought that his eyes were blurred and rubbed his eyes hard, but when he took a closer look again, he realized that it wasn't blurred eyes or an illusion at all. He violently lifted the covers and came to the window with his bare feet. Immediately afterward, his pupil shrunk violently. It was because he saw the entire world in front of him, inverted above the sky. In the sky was the earth of Tianhai City, and in the distance was the ocean. "What's going on here?" Zhang Yi hurriedly put on his clothes before opening the door to his room and coming outside. Lu Karen was waiting for him here, saying with some excitement amidst her anxiety, "Brother, come outside and see." She pulled Zhang Yi's hand to the outside of the shelter. The rest of the family was outside at this moment, and tens of thousands of people were gathered in the icy sky around Tianhai Fortress, their eyes gazing at the sky. Zhang Yi raised his head, and it was hard to use words to describe what he saw at this moment. He saw the entire world. People living on the ground would not be able to see things in the distance clearly due to the presence of coverings. But now they were able to see everything just by looking up. "Mirage?" Zhang Yi muttered. "No, it's not something that simple." Yang Xinshin stretched out a finger to point at the sky. "Brother, take a look there." Zhang Yi tilted his neck as the intelligent system pulled the lens closer, and then he saw the image of Tianhai City Fortress above his head. "It's the reflection of the world." Zhang Yi came to a sudden realization. If he pulled his field of vision farther away at this moment and looked towards this ice-blue planet from the middle of the vast universe, he would see the image of the entire world, which was projected into the sky, turning into an elegant and grand picture. This is a miracle. The Pope of Vatican, Alexander X, stood in the snow, kneeling devoutly and praying with his hands folded. It was an impossible feat for mankind to accomplish. Everyone on this planet was shocked by this sight. Zhang Yi lowered his head and said softly, "If there is really someone who can do all this, then there is only one explanation. That would be an underground civilization that possesses a level of technology far beyond ours." Just as Zhang Yi was inwardly shocked, the reflection of the world suddenly showed a flaw. A huge tip pierced through the reflection from the sky and slowly descended towards the earth. At the same time, the entire planet, 369 huge polyhedrons were suspended above the heads of the humans. Chapter 1767, The Capital Falls. Above the sky of this planet, one after another huge polyhedron appeared, as slender as a pike, their surfaces as glossy as mirrors, slowly descending from the sky, silently suspended in mid-air. Everyone raised their heads and stared dumbfounded at this bizarre and incomparable scene. No matter who it was, at this moment, they would all associate the image of the world hanging upside down in the sky with these bizarre polyhedrons. Zhang Yi's intelligence system was ringing non-stop, with messages from many people telling him about the strange movements around the world. It was only at this time that Zhang Yi realized that such a situation did not only appear in Tianhai City. Rather, it was all over the world, and the planet was completely surrounded by 369 huge crystals. The leaders of the world's major organizations had urgently convened a meeting to discuss how to face this matter. The original plan to travel to Fremons scheduled for today was also temporarily put on hold. Messages from Meng Yuanjun, Deng Shintong, and Zhu Jing were sent to Zhang Yi continuously, and the leaders of the major regions were to convene a meeting to discuss about this emergency. Zhang Yi didn't bother to open the three-dimensional projection and directly joined the meeting by voice. He looked at the spectacular scene in front of him, his eyes staring at the polyhedron hanging high above his head, and was actually ready to strike at it at any time. Of course, it also included the readiness to run away at any time. It was good that the polyhedron appeared to be suspended overhead, but according to the intelligence system's hints, it was still hundreds of kilometers away horizontally from Zhang Yi's location. As soon as the meeting started, all the heads of the various regions who had been called over in haste were already in an uproar. "Did you guys see that thing? Can anyone tell me what the hell that thing is?" "Hell no, I've already had the missile units targeting it, and as soon as we find out that it has any intention of attacking, we'll immediately launch missiles at it. We have observed it, this thing is very strange, it surprisingly doesn't have any mechanical bite marks on it. It looks surprisingly like a naturally formed hole. Don't be ridiculous, how could this kind of thing be naturally formed?" At this time, Li Changgong made a suggestion. "It's pointless for us to argue like this without a head. As I see it, we need to send someone over to scout it out." Black Tortoise cautiously warned, "But we're not at all sure where it came from. And whether the civilization controlling it has good intentions towards us. If we send out warplanes for reconnaissance, there's a chance that it will be recognized as an attack. It will be troublesome then." Meng Yuanjun's voice pumped out, "On my side, I'm also conducting a meeting with the United Worlds Organization at the same time, and we're currently warning all the major powers around the world that they should never act without permission." Li Changgong said, "If we don't use warplanes, wouldn't it be fine to use people? Chaos, your ability allows you to approach quickly and not be detected. Why don't you go over and scout close by?" Zhang Yi's everything under heaven could isolate all force-level substances, so the means of detection would have no effect on him either. Zhang Yi, however, said, "Since it's a higher civilization, what makes you sure that the other side won't be able to detect me? I'm not interested in risking my life." Li Changgong continued, "But right now, other than you, there is even less that anyone else can do." "None of my business." Zhang Yi just replied coldly. He never acted rashly until he was sure of the other party's details. Instead, he had already made a gesture towards Zhou Qi and the others, telling them to focus on his side. In the event of any accidents, he would be the first to take his people and leave. Li Changgong seemed a bit angry. Chaos, you're always like this. No sense of the big picture at all. Well, what's the matter? You bite me. Zhang Yi sneered. You. Li Changgong was furious, but he also knew that Zhang Yi was never subject to moral abduction, so it was pointless to reason with him. However, Black Tortoise also said to Zhang Yi, Chaos, the situation at hand is too sudden. Among us, you are the strongest and your abilities are convenient to go scouting. You should reconsider. Zhang Yi hooked up the corner of his mouth and said disdainfully, Observation? Observe what? That kind of things. If they didn't show up actively, our various scouting equipment wouldn't even be able to detect their existence. The level of technology that can project the entire world above the sky surpasses humans of today's era by an unknown amount. Its surface is as flat as one, and unless one breaks the shell to enter it, one can't do much after getting close. Is it hard to make me go over there and look in the mirror? The meeting fell into a silence, and after listening to Zhang Yi's words, they also felt that there was indeed some truth to it. However, when one was faced with such an incomprehensible sight, panic would inevitably arise. And what made them the most anxious was that they had no way to take any action yet. The 369 polyhedrons that hung high above the sky did not move either, just quietly suspended in midair. At this time, Yan Xinxin made a guess. If these polyhedrons are distributed throughout the entire planet, then they could be some sort of scouting device used to learn all the information about the surface world. Yang Xinxin woke up the dreamer with a single word. Since the other party was a higher civilization, there was naturally no need to play God with humans. Then projecting the whole world, the greatest possibility was to learn the surface world's information. However, the possibility of these polyhedrons possessing a powerful killing power cannot be ruled out. Moreover, spying on the surface world could also be a precursor to an attack. Zhang Yi's eyebrows tightened. At this moment, the executives of the world's countries and organizations had completely exploded. They were excitedly discussing this matter, with the radicals even wanting to launch missiles to attack, while the moderates were of the opinion that the other party had not launched an attack and should have come with good intentions. Someone should be sent forward to communicate. Zhang Yi only felt that his head was aching vaguely. There was bound to be some sort of connection between Fremon's mechanical civilization and the strange polyhedron in the sky. It probably came from the same civilization if they were right. But it couldn't be said, because as it stood now, there were not a few civilizations in the underground world. The world seemed to be shrouded in a fog. Only the human world was in the clear. He rubbed his brow and said to the crowd, All of you enter the interior of the fortress, Muyen get ready to put everyone into shadow space. For the next time, the world was in a state of tightness. Zhang Yi thought that with the appearance of this kind of thing, there would definitely be a next move. However, 3 more days passed all of a sudden. And those polyhedrons hanging high in the sky did not make any more moves. Everyone was waiting nervously and anxiously. On the one hand, they were afraid of these huge polyhedrons, afraid that they would do something. But on the other hand, they were as if they were people waiting for execution, fearing that one day these weird polyhedrons would attack humans, and they were anxious all the time. But there was good news. When the sky changed, those mechanical legions of Fremons that had been destroying the human kingdom's territory suddenly disappeared. A second possibility sprouted in Zhang Yi's heart. Could it be that these polyhedrons in the sky belonged to a more powerful civilization? And their appearance had made the previous mechanical civilization jealous, thus not daring to act again? Or even that these polyhedrons belonged to the creator of this world, and even the god's punishment that had warned the underground civilization of its powerful existence before had come from it? After all, they had appeared in the surface world for so long without any signs of being subjected to celestial execution. All sorts of speculations passed through Zhang Yi's mind repeatedly. Time passed for another week. It was as if these polyhedrons were locked up in the sky, with only the entire world reflected in the dome of the sky reminding people of their existence. No one dared to go to their deaths to attack them. This was a dead order from the major powers of the world. People began to get used to their existence, and some even believed that these were things created by the higher civilizations that guarded the peace of the world. Because after they appeared, the various regions, where strange movements had once appeared, also briefly disappeared. However, Yang Xinxin thought that they were overly optimistic. "It's just the dark forest law," she said indifferently. Zhang Yi inquired what she meant. Yang Xinxin looked around and brought an orange from the top of the fruit plate. "Our planet is like this orange. Humans are the microbes that live on the orange peel. We are under the light, uncovered, and can see clearly. But underneath the orange peel, there is a much wider space. They are wrapped in the orange peel, so no one knows what it's like inside. Humans have developed a civilization for thousands of years, but have we really studied this planet under our feet thoroughly? The answer is no. There are unknown civilizations underground, and such a huge space is capable of holding more than hundreds of times more life than the surface. Right now I think that civilizations are only vaguely aware of the existence of other civilizations amongst themselves. They are hiding in different areas, at different depths, and no one knows how powerful the other side is. Therefore, they must carefully hide their tracks on one side, and pry for information about other civilizations on the other," she said as she peeled off the orange peel and stuffed a piece of orange into Zhang Yi's mouth with a smile on her face. "Remember what was recorded on the lost slate. There may be some kind of rule in this world that allows creatures to take the form of a pyramid, constantly killing and concentrating life energy on the small number of people at the very top. This could speak of individuals, or it could be a relationship between civilizations. We must acquire space to survive by constantly hunting other civilizations." Zhang Yi thought that what Yang Xinxin said was very reasonable. Now, he had to sit on top of the Tianhai fortress every day, looking up at the strange polyhedron that hung high in the sky. 10 days passed in the blink of an eye. Originally, this time was so fast that it passed by without anyone feeling it. But these 10 days had plunged the whole world into an incomparably tangled and complicated state. It was as if they had become a part of this world, and together with the inverted image of the world, they had become the norm in people's lives. An impulse arose within Zhang Yi's heart every day, that is, to personally go to the vicinity of polyhedron to explore it, as Li Changgong had said. But years of prudent habits had rigidly curbed this thought. However, this thought was intensifying with each passing day, and Zhang Yi understood that if this situation continued, one day he would not be able to control his inner curiosity and the emotion of being overwhelmed by restlessness all day long, so he would take the initiative to go out and find out what was going on. However, no matter what the human thought, those polyhedra were still like satellites. Those polyhedrons were still like satellites, hanging high in the sky without moving. Finally, in the midst of such silence, someone was the first to be unable to endure the loneliness. From on side, the underground movement began again. And this time, the scale is bigger and the conflict is more violent. Zhang Yi received a request for help from Fremon's, but this time it wasn't Alexei, but an official from Fremon's diplomatic department. He asked Zhang Yi for help with earnest words and even some trepidation among his eyes. "Your Excellency Chaos, didn't you promise to come and support our Fremons? Why haven't you moved yet? The trouble we're facing is even worse nowadays." Zhang Yi wanted to say, "Didn't they subside for a while before? Is the situation bad?" Zhang Yi asked curiously. The official from the Foreign Affairs Department took a deep breath. He looked tired and his eyes had obvious dark circles. It was obvious that he had not rested properly recently. "Karen City has fallen. Karen City, the capital of the Kingdom of Fremons. The position was equivalent to Xinjiang City in Huaxu Kingdom. When Zhang Yi heard this news, his person froze. Karen City has fallen? Can't even the Pantheon's people stop them? The official's voice was filled with despair. The attack happened too suddenly. Those monsters unexpectedly invaded Karen City from underground all of a sudden. We couldn't detect them at all and were caught off guard. Although the adults of the Pantheon struck back in time, the scale of their attack this time was too huge, and there were also some terrifyingly strong humanoid creatures among them, with a strength even greater than that of the adults of the Pantheon. We are simply powerless to stop them from destroying everything. The man's voice was filled with despair inside. Zhang Yi could not imagine the sight of a world power whose capital was destroyed overnight. One should know that Fremons was different from Huaxu Kingdom. Although they were also a federal system, the top brass had always held absolute power. Even the most powerful mutant organization Pantheon was located in Karen City. Even so, Karen City couldn't stop an attack from a mechanical civilization. This also meant that the mechanical civilization underneath Fremons was probably more powerful than the Wulwan Empire. No, it was safe to say that they possessed more power than the Wulwan Empire. If the mutant aspect was not taken into consideration, on the technological level, it was already a crushing lead. Zhang Yi asked, what about the casualties on the Pantheon side? 3 Epsilon-level mutants died in battle. However, the main gods of the Pantheon successfully killed their way out of the siege and escaped to Samaritan City with their executives. I also hope that Your Excellency will look at the many years of friendship between the two countries, as well as our previous support to you in the Battle of the Wulwan Empire, and bring troops to help us drive out those terrifying creatures of the underground civilization. Chapter 1768, The Deng Family's Intelligence Network. The news of the fall of Karen City quickly spread throughout the world and shocked the entire world. It seemed like there had been so much surprising news in the recent past that many people's brains couldn't turn a corner. A strong sense of fear gripped everyone's heart. It seemed that it really was the end of the world coming. Originally, it was thought that the invasion of the Wulwan Empire being repelled meant that a period of peace could follow at the very least. But unexpectedly, that was not the end, but only the beginning. Zhang Yi understood that the battle between the Wulwan Empire and the allied forces of Huaxu Kingdom had allowed many underground civilizations that had long been foolish to see the strength of mankind, as well as the scale of that powerful rule that existed in this world. Looking up, the polyhedron high in the sky wondered if it was the enemy. And the mechanical civilization of Fremons had destroyed the capital of Fremons overnight. It had happened so suddenly that it had caught everyone off guard. But there was clearly not much time left for them to think. That official from the diplomatic department pleaded with Zhang Yi, who nodded with serious eyes after glancing at him. Don't worry, I'll go over to provide support. On behalf of all Fremons people, I would like to express my 10,000 thanks to you. He bowed deeply before ending the communication and proceeded to contact other countries and international organizations that were expected to help Fremons. Zhang Yi sat on top of the Tianhai fortress and raised his head to utilize the intelligence system to bring his field of view closer, carefully watching the polyhedron in the sky. He sent a message to Yang Xinxin and called her over. When Yang Xinxin climbed up and sat down next to him, Zhang Yi talked about what had just happened. Inside Yang Xinxin's eyes, there was also a flash of shock, but she quickly regained her composure. Is it as simple as a human destroying an ant nest? In everyone's opinion, it was impossible for a powerful kingdom like Fremons to have its capital destroyed in an instant. But to those powerful underground civilizations, it was as simple as destroying an ant nest. I wonder why they didn't suffer celestial execution. Could it be because they sent out a mechanical army? As long as they aren't living creatures, they can circumvent the judgment of God's punishment. However, I remember he just said that humanoid creatures appeared in the middle of the battle that invaded Karen City. Zhang Yi rested his hands behind his head as he lay on a soft and comfortable recliner and looked at the sky. Yang Xinxin said persuasively. However, one thing that can be confirmed now is that although Karen's city fell, the main reason was that their technological means did not monitor the attack that was launched from underground. The fall of a capital city is not so much as to hurt. After all, the main force of the Pantheon still exists. So the situation at hand is actually not as bad as imagined. These words relaxed Zhang Yi's heart a bit as he nodded. Indeed. In that case, let's take action. He suddenly sat up. We've been making preparations for battle at all times during this period of time, and I don't intend to continue suffering like this. Tomorrow, we'll set off for Fremons. Zhang Yi's eyes were resolute. He didn't want to continue to be troubled by the presence of the polyhedron in the sky. But before that, there is one thing I need to confirm. Yang Xinxin knew Zhang Yi very well as she pointed at the sky and said, "You mean, that thing?" During this period of time, they had utilized all of humanity's technological means to survey it remotely. But the result was nothing, and they were only able to see the muddy, mirrored appearance. Zhang Yi nodded, then he stood up. After a long period of thinking, he had already made up his mind. At least for the time being, these polyhedrons had not launched an attack on the human world, and it was bound to be the masterpiece of some top-notch technological civilization. Zhang Yi would not launch an attack on it, and if it was just a close peek, it should not be enough to cause an attack from the civilization behind it. After all, using radar and satellites to scan the humans had dried up a long time ago, so some closer observation should not be a problem. For safety reasons, Zhang Yi was still fully armed before he opened the dimensional gate and cautiously traveled towards the sky. His heart was beating fast, and he arrived near that polyhedron shortly after. It was only when he got close that he could feel how huge it was. Even the largest skyscrapers in the world were not even half as big as it, and the diamond-like polyhedron's mirror-like appearance immediately reflected Zhang Yi's figure after he got close. As long as Zhang Yi raised his head, he could see his own reflection appearing in the sky. Zhang Yi surrounded it and observed it carefully. The ability of everything follows the trail, could foresee any risk that might come within 3 seconds. However, it also had another very useful ability, the sixth sense. In addition to predicting crises, it would raise an alert omen for any existence that might pose a threat to Zhang Yi. However, after Zhang Yi carefully circled around it, that dangerous omen did not appear. Until this moment, Zhang Yi's hanging heart was finally released, and his back had been thoroughly wet at some point. However, a bitter smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. It turned out that the thing that had terrified the world for so long was really just a detection instrument. Zhang Yi had always had this conjecture, and he and Yang Xinxin had also analyzed that its purpose of projecting the world was to make observations. But it wasn't until this moment that he was really able to confirm it. This would also explain why Fremons was suddenly attacked by a mechanical civilization on a large scale. 2 possibilities. First, the mechanical civilization was the same as the polyhedron civilization, and they had decided to strike only after observing the entire world, confirming the civilization level of the human civilization, and judging that they were far stronger than the human civilization. Second, the mechanical civilization did not strike before because they were afraid of the weird polyhedron civilization that suddenly appeared. But they had realized one step earlier than the humans that the polyhedron above the planet was merely a detection instrument, so they struck out at Fremons. Both explanations were very reasonable. Just like when the Wulwan Empire invaded the human world before, it also had to use Totoro as well as Scout and Advance to test the strength of the human civilization before it dared to strike. In the middle of the dark forest, no one was sure of the strength of the others. The role of the hunter and the prey changed, often only in a thought. That was why the Wulwan Empire was hunted by White Dragon, a higher-level hunter, when it attacked Huashu Kingdom with a gun. Zhang Yi landed as he told Yang Xinxin about his judgment. For now, it seems that the things in the sky are just instruments used to explore the intelligence of human civilization. However, for safety reasons, this time when we set out, we should still take the entire Tianhai City fortress with us. In case his judgment went wrong, then his foundation wouldn't be damaged. Tianhai City would only leave behind those tens of thousands of ordinary residents and laborers for them to continue building Tianhai City. It wasn't that Zhang Yi was cruel, but Mu Yan's shadow space could only accommodate a few thousand people to live normally. Yang Xinxin nodded, not expressing any objections to this. As for whether or not to inform the others of this news, the corner of Zhang Yi's mouth curled into a smile. Of course not. He was not simply heading to Fremons to do a good deed, he was also thinking of taking the opportunity to pull some wool down from the bodies of high-level civilizations. Just let the other countries and organizations continue to wallow in the fear of the polyhedron civilization. He, on the other hand, would have to take a step ahead. Before Zhang Yi was ready to depart, an unexpected person came to Tianhai City. His old friend, Deng Shintong. Deng Shintong had rushed to Tianhai City with members of the Heavenly God Squad, fully armed. As soon as he saw Zhang Yi, he ran over with an affectionate smile, waving while shouting, "Old Zhang, I'm so happy to see you." Zhang Yi felt that there must be something fishy going on. This guy coming to find himself in such a current situation nowadays was definitely not a good thing. Stop. Why did you guys come over?" He looked at Deng Shintong with a face full of curiosity. Deng Shintong didn't see any outsiders at all as he came over to pull Zhang Yi's hand and said with a smile, "I heard that you're planning to bring your whole family and go to Fremons, right?" A glint of playfulness flashed inside his eyes. Zhang Yi gave him a blank look. "Why do you say that like I'm going to emigrate? Whenever I go out on a mission, I don't bring my entire family along." Deng Shintong pointed to his nose with a grin, "Then this time, bring me one as well." Zhang Yi looked at Deng Shintong. Not many people knew about the fact that he was traveling to Fremons. Only the top echelons of the various regions had heard about it. However, considering the Deng family's connections, it was not surprising to learn of this information. But right now, this world was becoming more and more elusive, and danger was even more likely to occur at any time. Why would Deng Shintong want to venture to Fremons with himself? Why do you want to go along? Do you know what's going on in Fremons right now? Deng Shintong smiled and nodded. Of course I know. A new underground civilization has appeared and it destroyed Karen's city overnight. A ray of essence erupted from his eyes. That's why I'm going over with you. Because I feel that this must be a huge opportunity that I can't miss. Deng Shintong was a 1-in-a-million genius. Well, if we were to calculate it proportionally, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was a 1-in-100,000 genius, or even a 1-in-a-million genius. However, after the end of the world, his strength had always been in a very awkward situation. This was because the people he was comparing himself to were all top-tier mutants like Zhang Yi, Gao Changkong, and Ho Tu. Even now that he had broken through Epsilon's life level, he was only at the White Chariot level. In terms of supernatural ability index, he was still not as good as Flower and Liang Yu. That was why he desperately wished to raise his power. I know that Zhu Zheng's side has looked for you, wanting Zhu Yu to go with you. But of course I know you, there's no way you'd bring that kind of guy with a deadly enemy gene along. After all, you're too steady. But I'm different, I'm your partner. And at least I'm an Epsilon now, taking me over there will always help you in some way. Zhang Yi raised an eyebrow, it was certainly good to have help. Moreover, amongst the high-level mutants in the 6 regions, it seemed that the only one who was still on good terms with him was Deng Shintong if they were really talking about their relationship. Damn, what kind of relationships did he have? Do you know that it's dangerous there? People will die. Zhang Yi warned Deng Shintong. An underground civilization that even the Pantheon has to retreat from, there's a high probability that the White Chariot will die even if it goes over there. Deng Shintong smiled, that's why I'm going with you. I do know you, as long as I follow your side, I will definitely be the safest. He opened those narrow peach blossom eyes and his expression became a bit more serious. It's precisely because I sense that the world is becoming increasingly unsafe that I'm going with you. He glanced up at the sky. What tomorrow will be like, no one can say right now. The only way to feel safe is to make yourself strong. His right hand was placed on his chest, feeling the rhythm of his heart. Old Zhang, I can understand you more and more now. In the past, Deng Shintong was the heir of a big family, wealth, power, fame. He had everything a man in this world could only dream of. So he never needed to feel anxious about anything. However, in front of a higher-level civilization, everything in the world of men had become an illusory bubble. Only one's own strength was the most important. Deng Shintong realized this point. Zhang Yi said in his heart, this kid has recently grown in his ideological awareness. However, he would not be impressed that easily. Zhang Yi hugged his arms and looked at him with a scrutinizing gaze. What you said makes sense. It's just that I still have one more question. Deng Shintong hurriedly said, you say it. Zhang Yi asked, what reason do I have to take you there? White Chariot level Epsilon can hardly offer me much help when I'm in trouble. Compared to the help you can bring, the responsibility I bear to protect you is a bit more troublesome. Not to mention, I'll have to share my loot with you. The smile on Deng Shintong's face became even more intense. He rubbed his nose. Old Zhang, you are still the same as in the past. He sighed and said leisurely, but fortunately, I know you well. Don't worry, I won't let you suffer in this matter. I will provide you with what you need most. Zhang Yi raised his eyebrows. Oh? What? Intelligence. Deng Shintong slowly spat out these two words from his mouth. Zhang Yi immediately looked at him, his heart beating 2 beats faster. You can get me the intelligence on Fremons? He had inquired about Fremons with Meng Yuanjun and Newton, and later asked Zhu Jing as well. But what they provided to Zhang Yi were all rather vague things. Fremons, as a world-class power, was extremely protective of its own intelligence, and of course, it would not easily divulge internal information. By the time it came to pass, the emergencies on the battlefield were endless, and they themselves were unable to completely grasp the whole picture. Zhang Yi did not know where Deng Shintong got the courage to say such words. Deng Shintong smiled faintly. Don't forget, our Deng family has connections all over the world. Even in Fremons.